Your phone is listening right now. Not to you necessarily, but someone somewhere might be. What if every text, every search, every whispered conversation near your device was being quietly copied and stored in a place you'll never see? Across the world, from Washington to Beijing, from London to New Delhi, intelligence agencies have built invisible networks that reach into your pocket. These aren't conspiracy theories written on basement walls. They're documented programs with code names, budgets, and legal frameworks that most people never agreed to. The smartphone you carry contains more sensors than a Cold War spy plane. Cameras, microphones, GPS trackers, accelerometers, and radios that never truly turn off. In the past 2 decades, these devices have become the primary tool governments use to monitor their own citizens. What changed wasn't the desire to watch. It was the technology that made watching everyone all at once finally possible. The modern surveillance era began quietly. In 2001, after the September 11th attacks, the United States passed the Patriot Act, which expanded government power to collect electronic communications without individual warrants. Most Americans heard about airport security and new police powers. Few understood that Section 215 allowed the FBI to demand business records, including phone logs, from any company without probable cause. By 2005, journalists began discovering that the National Security Agency was collecting domestic phone records in bulk, working with major telecommunications companies to copy entire data streams. The program operated in legal shadows, authorized by secret court orders from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a judicial body that meets in a windowless room and publishes almost nothing. Then came 2013. Edward Snowden, a contractor working inside the NSA's Hawaii facility, copied thousands of classified documents and fled to Hong Kong. What he revealed changed the conversation forever. The documents showed that the NSA's PRISM program collected data directly from the servers of Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Yahoo. The companies denied giving direct access, but the slides suggested otherwise. The truth lived somewhere in the technical details. The NSA could pull emails, photos, video chats, and file transfers, sometimes with company cooperation, sometimes through secret court orders the companies couldn't discuss. The Snowden documents also exposed programs with names that sounded like science fiction. XKeyscore allowed analysts to search through vast databases of internet activity using email addresses or IP numbers. Muscular tapped the fiber optic cables connecting Google and Yahoo data centers, copying hundreds of millions of user accounts. Tempora, run by Britain's GCHQ, intercepted and stored internet communications from transatlantic cables for up to 30 days. These weren't targeted operations against terrorists. The documents described bulk collection, gathering everything, then searching it later. One NSA slide from 2010 boasted of collecting data on 197 million conversations and emails per day. The agency's motto, "Collect it all," appeared in multiple training documents. Other countries watched and learned. China's Ministry of State Security expanded its Great Firewall to include mandatory backdoors in domestic smartphones, requiring manufacturers like Xiaomi and Huawei to provide access to encrypted communications. Russia passed the Yerevan Law in 2016, forcing telecom companies and internet providers to store all communications for up to 6 months and give security services access without court orders. Israel's NSO group developed Pegasus, spyware so sophisticated it could infect an iPhone without the user clicking anything. Just receiving a call, even one you didn't answer, could install it. The software turned phones into surveillance devices, activating cameras and microphones remotely, reading encrypted messages, and tracking location minute by minute. NSO claimed it sold Pegasus only to governments for counterterrorism. Investigations found it on the phones of journalists, human rights lawyers, and political opponents in countries like Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, and India. The technology improved faster than the laws. By 2018, even encrypted apps like WhatsApp and Signal faced new threats. Governments couldn't break the encryption directly, so they went around it, using spyware that lived on the device itself, capturing messages before they were encrypted or after they were decoded. End-to-end encryption still worked. But if your endpoint was compromised, it didn't matter. Australia passed the Assistance and Access Act in 2018, requiring tech companies to help security agencies access encrypted communications, even if that meant introducing vulnerabilities into their products. The law's language was vague. No one knew exactly what technical assistance meant, but it legally obligated companies to comply or face massive fines. In 2020, during global pandemic lockdowns, contact tracing apps appeared in dozens of countries. Some, like those in Germany and Switzerland, used decentralized systems that stored data only on individual phones. Others, like China's health code system integrated into Alipay and WeChat, fed location and health data directly to government servers, creating detailed movement histories for hundreds of millions of people. The apps often remained mandatory long after COVID case numbers fell. By 2023, researchers documented that smartphone advertising IDs, supposedly anonymous strings of letters and numbers, could be purchased by anyone with a credit card from data brokers. These IDs were linked to precise location histories, accurate to within a few meters. Governments discovered they didn't need warrants or hacking tools. They could simply buy movement data collected by weather apps, fitness trackers, and mobile games. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency confirmed it purchased commercial location data about Americans, bypassing Fourth Amendment protections. The evidence exists in layers, each one confirmed by different sources using different methods. The Snowden documents were verified through multiple channels. Tech companies confirmed receiving FISA court orders. Intelligence officials acknowledged the programs existed even as they disputed the interpretation, and subsequent government reviews admitted the bulk collection exceeded legal authority. These weren't leaks from anonymous sources. They were classified presentations, legal memos, and budget spreadsheets with agency letterheads. For Pegasus, the confirmation came through forensic analysis. Security researchers at Citizen Lab and Amnesty International Security Lab examined infected phones, extracting traces of the spyware's code and matching it to servers registered to shell companies linked to NSO Group. Apple and Google later confirmed the vulnerabilities existed and issued patches. NSO Group never denied making Pegasus. They only disputed who used it and why. Journalists verified government data purchases through procurement records obtained via Freedom of Information requests and leaked contracts. One such contract showed the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement paid $190,000 to Vental, a data broker, for access to location information derived from smartphone apps. The data included mosque visits, abortion clinic locations, and border crossing patterns. Chinese surveillance practices are harder to verify with documents, as the government rarely publishes internal directives. Verification comes instead from app teardowns, network traffic analysis, and testimonies from developers who worked on government contracts. When Xiaomi phones were found sending browsing data to servers in Beijing and Singapore, the company initially denied it, then later added an opt-out feature after international pressure. Intelligence agencies maintain that these programs are legal, targeted, and essential. According to official statements from the NSA, GCHQ, and allied agencies, collection focuses on foreign threats and requires multiple layers of internal approval. They argue that bulk collection doesn't mean bulk surveillance. Most data is never viewed by human analysts and is automatically deleted after retention periods expire. The agencies emphasize that domestic surveillance requires warrants except in narrow national security circumstances. Privacy advocates counter that collecting everything, even temporarily, creates a searchable database of innocent behavior. They point to documented abuses. NSA analysts querying databases to read ex-partners' emails, a practice internally called Loviant. The potential for misuse, they argue, outweighs the claimed security benefits, especially when multiple official reviews found these programs stopped few, if any, terrorist plots that couldn't have been prevented through traditional investigation. Tech companies occupy an uncomfortable middle ground. Apple has positioned itself as privacy-focused, implementing encryption even it claims it cannot break. Yet court documents show Apple complied with thousands of government data requests and built custom tools for law enforcement when legally required. Google similarly publishes transparency reports showing tens of thousands of requests annually, but the reports can't include classified national security orders, creating gaps in the public accounting. The technical reality is often less dramatic than either side claims. True end-to-end encryption does protect message content from interception in transit. But that protection ends if someone has physical access to your unlocked phone, if your cloud backup isn't encrypted, or if malware lives on your device. Most surveillance doesn't require breaking encryption. It requires exploiting the dozens of other places data sits unprotected. Significant gaps remain. We don't know how often governments use purchased commercial data versus court-authorized intercepts. We don't know which countries possess zero-click spyware capabilities beyond Israel. We don't know the full scope of cooperation between allied intelligence agencies and how data from one country's citizens gets shared with another's government. The most sensitive programs remain classified, and whistleblowers face prosecution. The impact shows up in quiet, corrosive ways. Journalists in autocratic countries stopped using phones for sensitive conversations, switching to in-person meetings in parks, speaking quietly, worried even about the devices in their pockets. Lawyers representing political dissidents faced a choice: communicate with clients using tools they knew were compromised, or avoid documentation altogether, weakening their legal defense. One human rights attorney in the United Arab Emirates discovered Pegasus on her phone only after noticing it overheating and draining battery abnormally fast. The chilling effect is hard to quantify but widely documented. Activists in Hong Kong deleted years of messages and photographs after China imposed its national security law, afraid their devices held evidence that could be used against them. Writers in democracies reported self-censoring their searches and emails, avoiding certain topics or words, even when they'd done nothing illegal. This is surveillance's secondary effect. Not just the watching, but the knowledge of being watched, which changes behavior without anyone ever being directly targeted. For ordinary people, the impact arrives as a slow erosion of trust. Your phone suggests a product seconds after you mentioned it aloud. Your feed shows ads for a medical condition you only discussed in private messages. The line between commercial tracking and government surveillance blurs into a general sense that privacy is already gone, that resistance is pointless. That feeling, whether fully justified or not, changes how people interact with technology and with each other. Think of your smartphone as a house with 50 doors. You locked the front door, the one marked encryption, but there are side doors, back doors, cellar windows, and a mail slot. Surveillance rarely breaks down the front door anymore. It just finds another way in. Cybersecurity experts describe the problem as an attack surface, the sum of all points where security can be compromised. Every app, every permission, every piece of code running on your device represents another potential entry point. Perfect security would require perfect code, perfect hardware, and perfect user behavior. None of those exist. What exists instead is a complex calculation. How much effort and resources would someone spend to access your specific data? For most people, the answer is zero. For journalists, activists, politicians, and executives, the answer can be millions of dollars. The legal framework hasn't caught up to the technology. Most privacy laws were written for an era when searching someone's papers required physically entering their home. But your phone contains years of papers. Every place you've been, everyone you've contacted, every photo you've taken, every website you've visited, every purchase you've made. Courts in different countries can't agree whether accessing this data is more like reading your diary or more like checking public records. That legal uncertainty is itself a choice, one that tends to favor the agencies doing the collecting. Historians note that surveillance technology often normalizes gradually. Then suddenly, tools developed for counterterrorism become tools for drug enforcement, then tax collection, then tracking protesters. This is called mission creep, and it happens because once a capability exists, and once the infrastructure is built, using it for new purposes requires only policy changes, not new billion-dollar systems. The philosophical question underneath it all is whether privacy can exist in a networked world. Perhaps the entire concept of privacy, of being truly alone with your thoughts and actions, was only possible in a narrow window of history. After we had walls and doors, but before we had devices that never stop reporting. Some technologists argue we should accept that change and focus instead on transparency and accountability. Others insist that privacy is a human right that predates and transcends technology, and that we're watching it die in real time. Here's what we know for certain: governments collect data from smartphones at scale, using legal mandates, purchase data, and sophisticated malware. The programs exist, the budgets are real, and the capabilities are documented. What we don't know is the full extent. Who gets watched, how often, and whether the legal and technical safeguards actually work when no one's checking. The rest of the story is about what happens next, and whether that trajectory can change. In the near term, expect more legal battles over warrant requirements for location data and whether buying data from brokers should require the same judicial oversight as directly collecting it from companies. Several cases are moving through U.S. appeals courts, with decisions expected in 2025 and 2026. Confidence level high. The legal questions are already teed up, and courts must rule. More countries will likely adopt laws similar to Australia's, requiring tech companies to build access capabilities into encrypted systems or face penalties. The European Union is considering its own version through proposed amendments to e-privacy directives. Whether companies will comply, push back publicly, or quietly implement hidden access remains uncertain. Confidence level medium. The political pressure exists, but enforcement mechanisms vary widely. New spyware tools will emerge as older ones are patched. NSO Group face sanctions and lawsuits, but competitors in Israel, Italy, India, and elsewhere continue developing similar capabilities. As long as governments have budgets and companies have engineers, the cat-and-mouse game between attack and defense will continue. Confidence level high. The market dynamics support this. The possibility of reform exists but requires sustained political will. End-to-end encryption could become standard in more apps. Data minimization, where companies collect and store less in the first place, could reduce what's available to governments. Stronger warrant requirements could add meaningful oversight. But these changes require legislatures to act against the preferences of intelligence agencies, and that historically happens slowly after scandals, not before them. Confidence level low to medium. The incentives push against reform more often than toward it. Your smartphone is the most intimate surveillance device ever created, not because it was designed for spying, but because it was designed to be indispensable. The watching is a side effect we're only beginning to reckon with. If you want to understand how this technology became so powerful in the first place, watch our next documentary, The Race to Build the First Smartphone, and How It Changed Espionage Forever.